You don't want to step in.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Iowa 911 Communications Council meeting for September 13th, 2018. I'd like to do our introductions, if we can start down there with George, and then we'll work our way out to the crowd.
George Griffith, Iowa Peace Officers Association, Urbandale Police Department.
Rob Dennett representing the Iowa EMS Association.
Lawrence Harpence representing IJIC.
Kara Sorrells representing Iowa APCO.
Mike Bryant, Iowa Professional Firefighters.
Rob Rotter representing Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association.
Jeff Anderson, representing the Iowa Emergency Management Association.
Gerard Myers, representing the Iowa Department of Public Safety.
Tracy Bearden, representing Iowa NENA.
Blake DeRucci, Iowa Homeland Security and Emergency Management, 911 Program Manager.
James Chambers, representing Large Telecom.
Mark Murphy, representing Iowa Firefighters Association. Robert Bokinski, Pella Police Department.
Marcia Slycord, Pella Police Department.
Jamie Robinson, Mahaska EMA 911. I'll just hold it for you.
Cheryl Lackloff, Mahaska County 911. Amanda Roush, Story County 911.
Joel Martin, Iowa Utilities Board.
Brian Bigville, Westcom.
Doug McCaslin, Warren County 911.
Crystal McIntyre, Warren County. Diana Richardson, Raycom.
Curtis Pione, Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Brent Long, Polk County Sheriff's Office.
Jim Lundstead, Homeland Security, OEC.
Josh Humphrey, Iowa County Emergency Management.
John Paoli, Iowa Homeland Security.
Steve Reams, GeoConnect, Zetron.
Terry McClanahan, Dallas County Sheriff's Office.
Andy Buffington, Winnebago, Hancock County Emergency Management, 911 Communications.
Chris Myers, I'm the SWIC.
Stephen Rodriguez, Iowa Communications Network.
Tammy Rodriguez, ICN.
Rich Bates, Light Edge.
Mike Lauer, ICN.
And back to you.
Okay, do we have anybody on the phone? Denise Pavlik, Scott Emergency Communications Center.
Hi, Joel King, Synergem Technologies.
Mike Casper, Lynn County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, thank you and welcome. Could I entertain a motion to approve today's agenda? Okay, moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? And motion carries. And then likewise, a motion to approve the August 9th minutes. Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Blake.
Good morning, everyone. How many peace apps have signed up for the shared services? That's actually +4 from last month. We did have Hancock County turned up as the pilot program, as the proof of concept. It was mostly successful. You good?
Rob, will you be filing the incident report? Sure, don't work that.
That doesn't happen every day.
If you want to be the chair, you can run.
There you go.
All right, so moving on. Hancock County was mostly successful. There was kind of an unforeseen issue when they went to basically plug the wireline component into the shared Zetron system. The wireless component, the SIP conversion, all of that worked great. So for the most part, Hancock County is up and running. At the moment, Winnebago is still receiving their wireline calls, and that should be remedied later this month. So again, it's a pilot program for a reason, and definitely a lesson learned. We sent out an email earlier this month that the full statewide data set for aerial imagery is now available. I'll make sure this slide gets included in the notes. Don't expect anyone to copy down that link, but the link was also available in the email that we sent out. And then also along those lines, the annual collection of forms that our office receives, that will be going out soon with all the updated links and information as far as what the PSAPs and counties need to provide to us. Along those lines, one of those forms is always the annual service board budgets. We're going to have a webinar sometime in October with Department of Management to really kind of have a budgeting 101 class. I think there's been a lot of turnover and a lot of things that I've noticed as I aggregate that data that can kind of be improved upon. I'm not going to be able to have a 911 program update as part of Iowa APCO NENA. So it'll kind of be a program update as well as a budgeting 101 kind of class. I haven't sent anything out yet, but again, look at that to come out soon. Sometime in October, we'll probably have that. The monthly GIS grant reports are up on the slide. In August, an additional 16 counties met the benchmarks for a total of $96,000. Again, many other counties they meet all the benchmarks. They just need to upload their data within this first window. So now that it's past July 1st, that can be done. So there's the data for the GIS grants and where we're at. Next month, I'll throw a map up here so you can see kind of 1 quarter in who's received what and who's met the benchmarks. Nothing on this slide should be a surprise, just updated the numbers on where the Council Travel, Public Education, and Training Fund numbers are at. And just the reminder that the moratorium is in effect until January for additional requests. Putting Chris on standby here in case there's too many in-depth questions, but the ISICS board later on is going to kind of formally, hopefully approve the process for what the consulate and that process will look like. Basically, there's going to be a survey going out that's basically going to say, ask the PSAP what variety, what flavor, which brand you would like. At that point, the order will go in. ISICS and DPS will make that procurement. They'll be fully programmed with the talk groups dropped off at your PSAP and ready to use. The full installation, so if you want it embedded, if you will, into your existing radio console, at the moment, the thought process is that would be on the local jurisdiction to fund. Again, the thought process being we want that $450,000 grant program to go as far as we can to fund an ISICS consulate or the ability to communicate on ISICS at every PSAP. So again, it'll get dropped off, ready to use. How integrated you want it within your current radio system will be up to you. But again, that's going to be further discussed at the ISICS council meeting. For any questions or input, could take some now, but more focused at the meeting after this. Any questions on that component? Okay. Kind of a multi-phase presentation for this part. Many of you are aware on August 23rd for about 4 hours there was a fairly significant ICN outage. It impacted 89 PSAPs. ICN is going to explain kind of technically what happened, and then I kind of want to host a little bit of a discussion around they're putting things in place to prevent future happenings, but there's things that we can do programmatically to kind of mitigate future issues as well. So just kind of want to talk through some of those things. And Mike, if you want to come up and do the technical component.
Morning, everyone. So as Blake mentioned, on the 23rd, one of ICN's core switches rebooted on its own due to a hardware failure in the management plane of that switch at around 0800. After that switch came back, our techs logged into the device and noticed that some of the functions didn't come back as normal as they should have. So while routing functions were there, they were severely impaired. ICN techs worked to diagnose the scope of that problem until around 0930 when the network equipment and paths started to restore, but not to their optimal state. Of course, I'd like everyone to notice at this time, ICN itself was having issues as well as our administrative office, so we were dealing with those issues as well. So some of the timeframes were elongated because our office administration and NOC was down at the same time. From 0930 to 1230, ICN techs verified that traffic was up. During that time frame, all the switches looked to be functioning, but the restoral of the normal software protocols that manage traffic flow and engineering on the network did not restore. As this was discovered, traffic appeared to be traversing our 1 gig trunks instead of the standard 10 gig trunks that they should have. So the network was working, but there was too much traffic going down a small lane. Think of it like traffic congestion in the road. There was a block up. So as the trunks were functioning like this, our techs had to go one by one to every single device, every single path, and do a re-optimization manually because things were not functioning on a network-wide scale. As the techs went through and logged in and verified this, we did verify at 1230 that all traffic was back up to normal, and that included 911, wireless 911 call traffic as well. ICN currently has tickets open with its vendors to help find the reason for this protocol failure. We have no idea why that happened. This is the first time we've seen it, but we are working to mitigate to make sure that does not happen again. ICN's also in the progress of updating its core infrastructure that includes the PSAP delivery network to a more robust network that has equipment and paths and connections to mitigate this from happening in the future. So you can kind of see, I'm assuming you guys can see the slide here. This is just what I explained on the first portion of how normal traffic flow is. You can kind of see there, I have these purple lines drawn out. Maybe it's hard to see, but the orange dotted line is just how traffic flow would go, and that's just a theoretical representation of what the core and the backbone of the network looks like. As you can see, this is normal traffic delivery. There's connections between multiple devices, and traffic that should be going down 10 gig paths are going down that. So if you can switch to the next slide. Guys in there, or do I do that? I do it, okay. As you can see, after that core device rebooted, what ended up happening was traffic decided to, for some reason, not traverse paths down that path that everything connected to that core switch, and decided to go along 1 gig path. So think of it as, if any of you guys know anything about cybersecurity, think about it as an actual network denial of service, if you will. There was too much traffic going down too little of a pipe. So that's what happened, and in order to restore that, of course, this is a representation. There are hundreds and hundreds of devices in the network that had to go through and be re-optimized manually through just individual login. So that was the reason for the 3 hours of outage time frame. Any questions? Okay. If anything, you guys have any questions about this in the future, or you missed something, have anything else, you can get with Blake, or I can give you my contact info. Feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you.
So during that 3 or 4 hour period, as I think everyone knows, DPS State Radio acts as the last route option. They received about 80 calls, the majority of which were probably in the first 2 hours. DPS State Radio was also a little hampered because ICN manages their admin line phones as well as internet into JFHQ. So when they got the calls, they were a little bit limited on what they could do to actually receive them. And they have 3 dispatchers. They did a great job as far as I know, no complaints from anyone. That being said, we designed the secondary ESI net a handful of years ago, and kind of the conception at the time was that those 13 sites could act as regional backups as well. So instead of just being connected with the ICN like the 113 PSAPs are, these 13 PSAPs are also connected to the Comtech data centers via Windstream. So these 13 PSAPs continue to receive their wireless calls. And in fact, in some cases, they receive calls from surrounding counties that already list those PSAPs as their backup. So I'm somewhat making this up here, but so for instance, Cedar Rapids could have received calls from Jones County. if Jones had already listed Cedar Rapids as a backup. So one of the things that we're kind of proposing, and I've sent an email out about it, is that we change some of the conditional routing to make sure at least one of those goes to one of these 13 sites. So right now, kind of think about it, you have 4 options. The fourth one is always going to be state radio, not talking about touching that. The first 2 can still be up to the PSAP, so your primary and your secondary backup, totally up to the PSAP, don't care. I'm proposing taking that third one, that third option, and making sure that it's routed to one of those secondary ESINet sites. So I sent that email out, talked to the secondary sites to make sure they're on board with it. They're the ones that are going to be getting these calls, and identified some issues that I think are workable, but definitely want to bring them up and see if there's anything else that we need to think of. The first is kind of a PSAP to PSAP agreement, or maybe even we need something in place with the secondary ESINet sites. I think those type of agreements are becoming more and more popular in a next-gen environment as we are able to ship those calls from site to site. Agreements on what you do with them when you get them, how you're going to work them, how you're going to dispatch them. I have a couple templates. Johnson County and Cedar Rapids already have something in place. So either using that as a template, or a work group that I'm on between Iowa and Minnesota and North Dakota and South Dakota developed a template as well. I figured we could probably somewhat tailor that instead of interstate to intrastate. NCIC. NCIC isn't managed by our office. As far as I know, there is no redundant connection into PSAPs. I don't know what you do when NCIC goes down today. So again, another issue, if NCIC is going to be down at the same time, normal ICN wireless calls are going to be down. Probably need to figure out a solution on how those 13 would still access NCIC. How big of an issue is that? Radio dispatch. Somewhat goes away the more people get on the statewide radio system, but until that point, the map that I showed probably doesn't allow for 100% radio and dispatch at the moment. So again, something we need to work through, probably get a little creative. I'm not the expert, but there's a lot of smart people that can probably help figure it out. One of the things that was brought up is for those 13 sites, when they start getting calls from outside jurisdictions, how are they going to know something is down? One of the things that we also did to help mitigate future happenings is create an Alert Iowa group for all the PSAPs. So we would be able to automatically notify all the PSAPs as soon as we know there's a substantial outage. We set that up to ring into your PSAP 24/7 line. We didn't want it attached to a cell phone. That person might go on vacation, might be at home, doesn't do much good. So we have that set to ring into your PSAP. But that still is a time delay. It's still a manual process. I think in this case, somebody mentioned it was still 21 minutes before they realized that they were down. I don't know. We can probably try to shrink that number, but somebody getting a call from outside their jurisdiction is still probably going to be a PSAP's first realization that there's an issue. I don't know how to necessarily overcome that with no gap. So I don't know, and that goes right into the next one. I don't know if that means those 13 counties, you basically work the call. Somebody's got hold music on. Thank you. We're back. Hey, can you make sure if you're on the conference call, you're not on hold? Thank you. So I don't know if that means if you're in one of those 13 PSAPs, you just don't transfer the call back. You work the call as if it's your own. That's what DPS State Radio does. They work it because they figure if they're getting that call, they're getting it for a reason. So again, if you're in one of those 13 PSAPs, maybe that's the approach you take. Instead of trying to transfer it back to the PSAP it belongs to, which could turn into a vicious cycle, you just work the call. Again, not saying that's the answer, just a proposal. And then EMD protocols. Some counties use it, some counties don't. Some counties have policies that they won't transfer a call to a county that doesn't have EMD. So it was just brought up as part of the discussion. So again, I think these are workable issues. I don't think it should be a showstopper, but wanted to bring them up, see if there's any feedback on any of that concept. Something to also keep in mind, I'm trying to keep at the forefront on this during this issue, which nothing like this has happened for about 4 years. There was 80 calls over 4 hours. You dump those into 13 PSAPs instead of one, you're talking about 6 calls over 4 hours once every 4 years. So an issue, but something that we shouldn't lose sight of the tree through the forest through the tree. So yes, those are issues, but I think they're workable. And I think the most important thing is still getting the call answered the best way it can be. So again, I would take any more feedback on that. They really shouldn't. If they do, it would still go to last route option, which is DPS state radio. I mean, it would take a Windstream and an ICN outage for it to not get to one of those PSAPs. And like I said, just to reiterate, I'm not talking about changing that last route option. So you basically have 4 routes. I'm talking about changing the third. Okay. Well, if you think of anything or think of any good ideas to help overcome any of these issues, shoot me an email, give me a call. Not looking at doing anything this afternoon by any means, but don't want to lose sight of this either. If there's no other questions, ICN is going to be giving a presentation on where we're at with the wireline 911 merging. So I'll just pause again to see if there's any questions for me and then turn it over to them. All right, thanks.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. Blake asked that we present as on part of what we're doing on the 911 wireline aggregation project. As 911 wireline aggregation program manager, I'll be giving the majority of these monthly updates to you. So what are we doing today? What we're working on doing today is increasing stability. So we're going into those sites as part of our core, doing those power build-outs. We're upgrading the batteries, rectifiers, HVAC, the generators, so that we can prepare for this PSAP delivery network that we're putting in place. We're also putting in redundancy. We're doing fiber build-outs where we need to have those redundant routes going into these places. Communication and planning is a big thing that we've been working on for the last couple of months. We're not, even though we were awarded this RFP, we're not doing it blindly. We're also working with Homeland Security. We're working with Comtech and Zetron, the people that we're going to be handing off to make sure that we're all working together. And there is a good network of communication in there. So that is one thing that I'm very happy of, that they've came to the table and they're actually sharing quite a bit with us as we are with them. What are we planning for tomorrow? So we are looking at doing core build-outs for this independent 911 network. We have a RFP that's going out on the streets, should be out next week, where we do the Camatrunks 911 call delivery from the ILEX. That should be going out next week. We're looking at a time frame of delivering back to us. We were originally looking at that 30-day response. We're still looking at that. We might spread it out to 45 days, knowing that there are some holidays and things like that that they might have to work around to get that response back. But we are looking at doing a award of that by December 1st. That will give these ILEX 90 days to deliver to us. We're looking at having the end of February, having that stamp where they deliver to us. At that point in time, then we can start turning up these circuits. So as they start giving us those delivery times back to us, then when we do these monthly updates, I'll be able to present dates on when we're actually going to do different counties and that sort of thing. So it'll be a little more information for the individual PSAPs. So that's when the individual PSAPs will notice. It's about the end of February is what we're looking at to have all of our core work done, the independent network in place, and then also having those camera trunks starting to be delivered to us. And those will be a gradual install throughout the state and will probably take until at least the end of June to complete that. Are there any questions that you have for me today? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Blake, anything else? Okay. Do we have any technical advisory comments from council members? Okay. Anything from the floor? Okay. Chris?
Good morning. Thanks again for having me up here. Full disclosure, this may be a little bit of a longer update given everything that's going on. So bear with me. To start off with, regionalistics training is ongoing this week for PSAPs. So far, the feedback that I've gotten has been pretty positive as far as what people have been able to take away from it. This includes basically, what the system is, what its capabilities are, and for the most part, people have been able to come away with a pretty good understanding of how to use it to help them. We're already talking about training for the next fiscal year and what that could look like. We've got a couple of ideas on the table already, but we're going to start trying to finesse those and hone those to a little bit perhaps more of a sharper edge of sorts for next year's type of training, and maybe making it some sort of situationally based training, things like that. We know that every communication center is vastly different with this technology setup. So trying to figure out kind of, a way to help telecommunicators connect the dots with the system is kind of the goal of the next training that we're going to be looking at next year. On to the PSAP grant. We've been talking about this for a long time now, it seems like. We have about $450,000 to play with, and the goal is to try to get a control station or consulate into every PSAP pre-programmed and ready to go as much as we can. There's not enough money there to fully incorporate it into every console. Every console is different. They come with different costs. You may not have space available on some consoles, as some only have a limited number of audio ports relative to some of the more modern ones. So the goal is to try to make sure that we have a very sound process in place. We have a draft form that we're working on right now. At the board today, we're going to look at trying to grant some authority to the operations committee to work firsthand to make sure that what we're doing is going to work well for everybody. And then once we have those processes in place, we're going to rope back in with Homeland Security to make sure that we're fully grant compliant. This is a FEMA grant, so we have to be extra careful with things like procurement and deployment, inventory, and then eventually any future auditing. I've been told that they like to audit things, so we want to make sure that we have everything as buttoned up as we possibly can be. And with that, that's kind of the overall broad brush solution. My hope is that we can have it drop to the street within 30 to 45 days. So any questions on that before I move on? One thing as well, something that Blake mentioned previously with the way that ESINet may change. Something like a consulate or a control station in a PSAP would make some level of tactical dispatching possibly, especially if, say, one PSAP in one part of the state needed to communicate 4 or 5 counties over to the neighboring PSAP for the dispatch of a 911 call or something like that. So this does rope into a very large picture that we're kind of looking at doing across the state. So with that being said, in addition to that, last month we held a special board meeting to help facilitate this grant process and move it forward. All PSAPs that don't already have connectivity were approved for level 1 access. Level 1 access is interoperability only, so you'd have access to all the regional and statewide talk groups at that PSAP. It includes one ID for the control station or consulate. So basically, if we do drop it off on your doorstep and play the role of Santa Claus, all you got to do is plug it in, and you'll be able to transmit and receive on the system. I'll pause there for another question, since that might bring some. Okay. As far as standards go, we have a large assortment of standards that are available on our website. Now, again, this is kind of key to how the system is going to operate and how people can use it. Our next standards meeting is set for September 18th. We're far enough along with these standards now that we can kind of pump the brakes a little bit and kind of see what's left to take care of, and maybe figure out if there's some boutique standards that we need for our agencies out there. From what I've been able to gather so far from some initial feedback and making some phone calls, is that the transport standard has been very popular so far, so perhaps we need to start looking at more of those operationally focused standards now that we're kind of out of the doldrums of all the technical ones. So we're going to be moving forward with that. As far as training opportunities go, we have several classes coming up. Our ICS 300 offerings are coming up in October and November. I believe we have double-digit registrants up for the October one. We have, that's in Cedar Rapids. The second one is in Mason City. I think we have about 4 or 5 registered for that as well. This will be kind of the lead in to what we want to launch next year with some ComL and ComT and other various courses that we want to offer as well. So if you have someone that wants to go down those pathways, this is a good class for them. Next fiscal year also, we're going to be collaborating very closely with Homeland Security on trainings that are offered across the state. So we have things ready to go there. We also have an incident tactical dispatch course coming up in October or November. I can't remember now. October, yes, thank you, Jim. That's going to be in Jones County. The incident tactical dispatch is kind of one of those things where you are dispatching from a remote location. We held one earlier this year. It was really cool. If you have anybody that would have an interest in that, or you want someone to be versed in that type of situation, this is a good class for them. They'll be using a communications trailer to dispatch from, and it covers everything from how to do it, what frequencies are available, and kind of how to make sure that everybody's on the same page with ICS forms and everything else. Lastly, any trainings that we do, we're collaborating very closely with the state training officer. So all this will be on the state training website, as well as our website and our social media profiles. So we're going to work on really getting that information out there in addition. One last item, perhaps it's fitting with Major Long, but I was informed last week that they're going to be renovating this facility next year. That means that we'll have to vacate for some time. I think the time period is starting in July and possibly through the end of calendar year 2019. So I'm working to try to find another facility. I plan on very closely working with Sheriff Rotter to make sure that we find an appropriate facility in the board and Sean Wagner. The facility that we're in now brings very unique capabilities in the sense that we have meeting space for an audience. We obviously have the meeting space for the people that are running the meeting, but then of course we have the audiovisual capabilities, and then parking is huge also. There's some places where we could migrate to tomorrow that would have similar capabilities inside of the building, but they're pretty anemic when it comes to parking. And I don't want to necessarily have to make someone walk 6 blocks to get to one of these things. So we'll be having those conversations very soon to try to figure out where we can go. I know I've already asked the question about when they're done with the renovations here, if we can come back, and the answer has been a soft yes. So hopefully we're back here at the start of calendar year 2020. Any questions?
So our next meeting, and
yeah, we're still here through the rest of the year. Yeah, we're good here through the rest of the year, and we may be good here all the way through halfway through calendar 2019. But once we get past June, things look a little sketchy as far as, well, this facility probably will not be available. It sounds like they're going to be doing some building updates, which could include walls being added or subtracted, or HVAC things, and chances are it won't be very comfortable in here while they're doing those things, and well, probably pretty noisy as well. Okay.
thank you. Okay, next we'd like to hear from Jim Lundstedt.
Good morning. Just to close the loop on Chris's brief, the tactical dispatch or interoperable tactical dispatch class will be 22 through 25 October in Jones County. And that is confirmed. So I believe the registration announcement has already been sent out to sign up. So
form for that online too. That's all on the state training website.
okay. Have three quick things for you. As you know, we're in probably one of the more active disaster years this year between Lane, Florence, Manghut, you name it, Isaac. We've had quite a series of disasters, so the importance of having a cadre of COMELs and COMTs is going to be increasing in demand. In the last couple of days, I've been looking at EMAC requests for not only equipment, but I just read this morning that we just mobilized Tennessee's Communications Type 2 unit, which is a site on wheels, 4 technicians and a pretty good handful of cash radios to North Carolina. And they have pending requests for a number of assets as Florence makes landfall. So as we get into the training cycle, if you have people who are interested and want to go through the training either to be a COMEL, a COMT, a tactical dispatcher, or a TERT dispatcher, I think you're going to see new calls for that kind of resource spin up here in the next few weeks, and hopefully will sustain that capability in the coming years. A couple of quick updates. I didn't hear anything mentioned on this, so I'll rebroadcast the FEMA public announcement. There is going to be a nationwide IPAWS test on 20 September. That will be the first test that involves wireless emergency alerts that use the presidential alert. That means if you have a WEA, wireless emergency alerts capable phone, you are going to get a message around 1:18 p.m. That particular alert cannot be turned off on your phone. If you're one of the people who turned off wireless emergency alerts for Amber and weather and everything else, that one is not in your pick list. So your phone is going to go off, meaning PSAPs, you may hear something. 1:18 p.m., the wireless emergency alert will be issued. FEMA has worked with a social psychologist to craft a message that is extremely succinct and hopefully clear that says at the end, no action is required. Immediately after the WEA test at 1:20 p.m. Central Time, we will have a EAS, the Emergency Alert System message. That will be the 4th annual test of the EAS. So those combined will result in, I fear, some calls to PSAPs.
Thanks for reminding me on
Yes,
that,
sir.
Jim. I did send that out to all the PSAPs. There is the information in the link that's in that email is really good and useful. I would
Yeah.
encourage everyone to actually take a look at it for real. It answers a lot of your questions.
Yeah, it's, pardon me?
What day is that?
September 20th, September 20th. And as far as I've heard, there is no plan to postpone this, even though we have active disaster response ongoing. This takes a long time to spin up, and there is a lot of interaction with the FCC on this, so it's not something that's just easily postponed. Secondly, those of you I constantly preach about GETS and WPS, you would not believe the number of requests we have to suddenly activate WPS as a hurricane comes in. The cost for WPS to your agency provided phones is likely going to be zero today. Most of the carriers have already reduced not only the activation fee, but eliminated the monthly recurring fee. If the phone is in your own name, your mileage may vary. But to make WPS and GETS easier, because if you're like me, you've used a calling card. We built an app for that stores the GETS detail and allows you to dial. I brought an example that can run from a desktop but didn't bring the right cable. This little dialer will allow you to take any phone number that's in your call list and integrate either GETS, WPS, or WPS plus GETS with a couple of button presses. You don't have to remember all the steps and the pauses and all that. It is now available for the iOS devices, and this is installed on my DHS managed device. It was a clean install. There was no pushback or request to activate through IT, and it has been available for some time for Android. Interestingly enough, we're starting to finally get traction with people to understand that FirstNet is not WPS. If you have a FirstNet capable of device, WPS is still an essential feature because not all calls will originate and terminate on FirstNet. So WPS complements the capabilities of the new FirstNet network, and it is going to be included at no additional cost on FirstNet-enabled wireless devices. So that hopefully clarifies that. The point being that if you call from a FirstNet wireless device to a Verizon network phone or a T-Mo or a US Cellular or a landline, WPS will give you the priority routing in that other carrier network that FirstNet inherently has within its own network. And finally, just a nerd alert, I took a few minutes this morning to take a look at the product announcements yesterday. The Fruit folks out in Cupertino announced a new series of phones, and there is a new Apple iPhone XS that will include band class 14, which is the FirstNet band, as well as band class 12 if you're one of the T-Mobile extended LTE customers. So the technology continues to evolve. I've had a chance to play with FirstNet devices in exercise over the last few weeks. Pretty cool technology with a phone you can drive a nail with. Not ready to start doing that, but some pretty ruggedized handsets, some good feedback from military units who have been using FirstNet devices to deployed CST members in the Pacific Rim, and some good feedback. You know, we're maturing, I think. Other than that, any questions for me?
Jim, just
Yes, sir.
something to add on your Fruit Watch
Yes, sir.
rollout.
Yes, sir.
The other capability that they announced was a fall
detect.
Yeah, which will, if it goes unanswered, will automatically call 911.
Mhm.
So it detects that you have fallen. If you don't,
It times out,
Yeah,
basically.
basically, and then it will call 911 and send a message to the people that you have listed as an emergency contact within your phone. So again, something for your PSAPs to be aware of.
Two cool technologies in that next generation of watch. Not only did you have the fall detector, and it invokes the same emergency SOS alert, you can cancel it, but it's an affirmative step. It uses the accelerometer, but there's also a cardio element in that detects a low pulse rate or AFib. They're pretty excited about it. To me, this is bleeding edge stuff that will affect us, because when we start to make things automatic, I've even made an emergency SOS call with my old hand-me-down Apple Watch. Didn't want to do it, couldn't stop it because I was driving, but this is going to happen. So results TBD. It's an interesting concept that the watch's accelerometer can invoke a help I've fallen and can't get up message. That's a positive. On the other hand, how do we teach people how to stop it when that happens? For example, when you drop your watch. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, do we have an update on our Chapter 34A Administrative Code Committee?
Yes, tomorrow is going to be our first meeting, so our second meeting, but our first meeting since we opened it up again to the group. It's going to occur from 9 a.m. till noon at 1907 Carpenter Avenue, which is our Polk County Emergency Management Office. We're going to meet in our EOC. If you do want to participate via conference call, then just call Blake or myself, reach out to us, and we'll send you the conference call number and code. So we're going to be working. So next month, we'll have a greater update of what we've accomplished.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any legislative issues we need to talk about? Nope. Okay. Next thing on our agenda would be going down to a discussion on the emergency backup. Did you cover that already, Blake?
I did cover it.
If there's any other feedback, though, would be if you had a chance to think about it or ask any questions.
Okay. Specifically, we're talking about the secondary ESI net discussion. Okay. No travel requests. Any business from the floor? Okay, any business on the phone? Okay. Then I would look for a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.